My name's Ryan. I'm 32, and if there's one thing I've learned the hard way, it's that nothing cuts deeper than betrayal that comes from your own blood. 6 years ago, I thought I had it all figured out. I had just landed a solid job in IT security, saved up for a down payment on a condo, and most importantly, I was in love. Her name was Elise. She wasn't flashy, wasn't the loudest person in the room, but she had this calm presence that made you feel like the world could fall apart and she'd still be standing with you. I had the ring. I had the speech. I even had the dinner reservation. And then my brother, Drew, swooped in like a vulture dressed in a slim-fit button-down and that smug grin he always wore when he thought he'd won something. I don't know exactly how it happened. Just that one week before I was going to propose, Elise pulled me aside, sat me down in the quietest corner of our favorite coffee shop, and told me she was confused. She said she felt something with someone else. And when I asked who, she hesitated just long enough for my stomach to drop before whispering, Drew. My older brother. The golden child. The one who never missed a chance to point out that I was always a step behind. The one who could charm a room and suck all the air out of it, then ask why no one else was breathing. He'd always been the louder one, the funnier one, the one our parents looked to with pride while I got the well, as long as you're trying your best, pat on the shoulder. I can't say I was surprised he tried something like this. I was surprised she said yes. They moved in together 3 months later. I cut contact. Didn't answer Drew's texts. Didn't respond when Elise emailed me. Twice. Asking if we could talk sometime. I didn't go to their engagement party, though Mom tried guilt-tripping me into it. Family is family, Ryan, she said. But all I heard was, your feelings don't matter as much as appearances. So I did what I always do. I shut down, got quiet, and focused on work. I poured everything into my career. I stopped checking social media. I built walls that even I couldn't see over. And in those walls, I found peace. Or at least something that looked like it. Then last week, Dad died. It wasn't sudden. He'd been sick for a while, lung cancer. But even though we all saw it coming, the finality of the call still hit like a train. I hadn't seen him in almost a year, but I still cried. Alone. In my apartment. While Drew posted photos of Dad from his hospital bed with long-winded captions about cherishing every moment and the honor of being his son, I wanted to scream. Drew, who hadn't even visited last Christmas. Drew, who only started showing up again when he found out Dad had a sizable life insurance policy. The funeral was last Saturday. Black suits, gray skies, people I hadn't seen in years whispering into tissues. I arrived early, sat in the back, quiet. I didn't want attention. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I just wanted to say goodbye. But of course, that wasn't in Drew's plan. He walked in 20 minutes late, hand in hand with Elise. She was wearing black, but it was the kind of black that clung to her curves like it was stitched in arrogance. Drew, meanwhile, looked like he was walking a red carpet instead of stepping into a church. He saw me almost immediately. I could feel his eyes scanning the room until they landed on mine. And that's when he smirked. Some guys just finish first, he said as he passed me in the aisle, loud enough for anyone near us to hear. I didn't flinch. I didn't blink. I just smiled. Then I said, "You still working that office job?" His smirk twitched, just slightly. He wasn't expecting that. But that wasn't the punch. That came next. Because just then, a sleek black limo pulled up outside the church, and the door opened. My wife stepped out. And when Drew turned, curious, wondering who I was smiling at, he saw her. And I swear, he nearly dropped Elise's hand. The moment he saw her, his whole posture changed. His chest, which had been puffed out like a peacock's, deflated. His shoulders dropped a fraction, and his jaw hung open just long enough for Elise to notice. She followed his gaze, confused, until her eyes landed on her. Sabrina. Elegant. Composed. The kind of woman who didn't need to raise her voice to own a room. She stepped out of the limo in heels that clicked like punctuation marks, wearing a tailored navy coat that stopped just above the knees and sunglasses that didn't quite hide the sharp focus in her eyes. She wasn't flashy. She was the kind of woman who made flash irrelevant. She walked over to me with the same calm presence Elise used to have. Only now I could see the difference. Sabrina didn't borrow grace. She carried it. She took my hand and kissed my cheek. And for a moment, I forgot we were at a funeral. The air between us didn't just shift, it changed ownership. Drew blinked like he was seeing a ghost. Elise's expression twisted, not with jealousy, but with something worse, regret. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. Drew was mouthing something, barely audible. Is that Sabrina DeWitt? Yup, the same Sabrina DeWitt who had once graced the cover of Forbes 30 Under 30. The same one who spoke at 3 tech conferences a year, had started her own company from scratch, and whose clients included half the Fortune 500. And the same woman who, unlike Elise, actually saw me. Who liked me when I was quiet. Who didn't need me to perform to be enough. But I didn't say a word. I just turned back toward the altar with her hand in mine. The ceremony began, and I could feel Drew's eyes boring into the back of my head the whole time. He was unraveling, and I didn't have to lift a finger. But that wasn't the moment things truly shifted. That came later, at the wake. The reception was held at our parents' old estate, a place that, to me, still smelled like burnt toast and disappointment. The house was full of mourners, and Drew was in his element. Shaking hands, laughing too loud, telling stories about Dad like he'd been his caretaker instead of a once-a-month visitor. Elise was glued to his side, occasionally tossing glances at Sabrina and me from across the room. At one point, I walked into the kitchen to get a glass of water and found my mother there, stirring something on the stove. She didn't look up. I saw who you brought, she said. I waited. And she sighed, deep and theatrical. It's just, this isn't a competition, Ryan. It's your father's funeral. I didn't make it a competition, I said calmly. Drew did. 6 years ago. She turned around then, eyes sharp, spoon still in hand. You're still bitter about Elise? You were barely dating a year. And Drew loved her. I actually laughed. I was going to propose. You knew that. She waved the spoon dismissively, like she was batting away a fly. You weren't ready. You never were. Always so cautious. So quiet. Drew goes after what he wants. Maybe you should have done the same. And just like that, I was 12 again. Sitting at the dinner table while Drew got praised for making the soccer team, and I got scolded for getting a B in math. I was 17, watching him get the keys to Dad's car while I got told I wasn't responsible enough yet. I was 25, listening to Mom tell me that Elise was more Drew's type anyway when I first told her what had happened. But I wasn't 12, or 17, or 25. I was 32, and I was done. So I said, thanks for the advice, and walked out. Later that evening, as the sky darkened and the crowd thinned, Drew cornered me on the back porch. His sleeves were rolled up, and he had a glass of something dark in his hand. Scotch, probably. The same kind Dad used to drink. He leaned on the railing next to me and didn't speak right away. Then, you really married her? Yeah, I said, sipping my water. Crazy world. He scoffed. You always were lucky. I turned to him. No. You always thought charm and shortcuts were the same thing as work. That's not luck. He stared at me. Come on, Ryan. I mean, Sabrina DeWitt? Really? I shrugged. She saw something in me, I guess. Yeah, he muttered. Bitter, something with a lot of zeros in her bank account. That's when it hit me. He wasn't shocked I was with Sabrina because he thought I wasn't good enough. He was mad because she was out of his reach. And suddenly, Elise didn't look so smug anymore. She looked like a consolation prize. He was about to say more, but then Mom called from inside. Drew, the lawyer's here. He straightened up fast, like a teenager called to dinner. Ah yes, the will. And here's where things started to unravel. Not for me. No, I had already grieved my father, already built my own life. But Drew? He still believed he was the star of the show. He had no idea what Dad had really been planning these past few years. But before we got to the lawyer and the will reading, something else happened. Something small, but explosive. Back inside, as people were gathering around the sitting room, I saw Elise whisper something into Mom's ear. They both glanced at me. Then Mom turned and said, Ryan, could I have a word? In private. I nodded and followed her into the hallway. She closed the door behind us. Elise is worried that Sabrina might cause distractions. She's very high profile, you know. I stared at her. You want her to leave? Just for the reading. It's family, Ryan. I almost laughed again, but there was no humor in it this time. You know, I said slowly, I used to think maybe you just didn't understand how much your favoritism affected me. But now I see it clearly. You chose not to see it. Ryan. No, I cut in, voice calm low. You and Drew can have your little alliance. But Sabrina is my wife. She stays. I turned and walked away. That was when I noticed the lawyer, a man in a navy blazer with a worn briefcase, setting up at the front of the room. And Drew? He was already in the front row, one arm around Elise, that smug grin creeping back onto his face. He had no idea what was coming. The lawyer cleared his throat and opened the folder slowly, drawing everyone's attention. The room fell quiet, but there was a tension in the air, static, unspoken, almost ritualistic. I looked around the room, scanning faces I hadn't seen in years. Most of them had aged. Some hadn't changed at all. And Drew. He sat tall, confident, with his leg crossed and a drink in hand like he was already calculating the numbers in his head. I'd like to begin by thanking everyone for being here today. The lawyer started, his voice dry and practiced. Mr. Harold Whitmore's final wishes were very clearly outlined in this document, which he updated in full a year ago. At the mention of the will being updated, I saw Drew stiffen just slightly. His fingers paused on the rim of his glass. He asked that I read the following aloud. The lawyer pulled out a smaller sheet of paper and began reading a personal message Dad had left behind. It wasn't poetic. It wasn't warm. It was matter of fact, the way Dad always was. To my family, if you are hearing this, then I am gone. I have no illusions that I was perfect, and I know I left many things unsaid. But I want my last actions to speak clearly. I've spent the last year watching more carefully than most of you know. I've seen who showed up, and who didn't, who gave with no expectations, and who took with both hands. What I built will not go to waste. Not again. A few people shifted in their seats. Mom blinked hard, her lips pressed tight. Drew, however, gave a tiny smirk, like he thought Dad was talking about me. I felt Sabrina's hand gently rest on mine. The lawyer placed the paper down and lifted the actual will. Let's begin with the estate, he said. Mr. Whitmore's residence, valued at approximately $2.1 million, will be transferred to. Drew leaned forward slightly. Ryan Whitmore. You could have heard a fork drop. I didn't move, didn't blink. My expression didn't change. But inside, my heart skipped. Not from joy, from shock. Drew's head jerked toward me. What? He blurted. The lawyer didn't flinch. The primary residence, along with all its contents, belongs solely to Mr. Ryan Whitmore. That has to be a mistake, Mom said, her voice rising. Harold promised Drew the house years ago. There was a previous version of the will, the lawyer confirmed, but it was legally nullified and replaced. This version is final and notarized. Drew stood up, knocking over his glass. This is ridiculous, Dad said. He told me. Please sit down, Mr. Whitmore. The lawyer interrupted, still calm. Drew didn't sit. He was staring at me now, face flushed. Elise reached for his arm, but he shook her off. What did you do, Ryan? What did you say to him? Nothing, I said evenly. Maybe he just saw things for what they were. But that wasn't the betrayal. That came next. The lawyer continued down the list. Stocks, accounts, trust funds. Some to me, some to charitable causes Dad had supported quietly over the years. Small things to extended family. And then, as for the remaining family business assets, the lawyer said, glancing down again, including Whitmore Logistics and its 51% majority shares, these have been placed in a private family trust controlled by. He paused. Sabrina Whitmore. The air went still. Even I was caught off guard. Drew's eyes went wide. What? Her? Are you kidding me? She's not even. She's not family. She is, I said quietly, my wife. The lawyer looked up. Mr. Harold Whitmore explicitly stated that he admired Mrs. Whitmore's business acumen and her vision for long-term sustainability. The trust ensures voting control over the company remains in her hands. Mr. Drew Whitmore retains no shares. That was the knife. But the twist came from the person none of us expected. Mom stood up. Harold would never do that, she snapped. He would never give it to her. Not over his own son. The lawyer calmly unfolded another letter. Mrs. Whitmore, there's a personal note addressed to you. Would you like me to read it? I don't care what it says, she barked, eyes burning. The lawyer read it anyway. To Margaret, you've spent the better part of 30 years telling me which son deserved more. I let you. I thought I was avoiding conflict. But I saw how you treated Ryan after Elise left him. I saw how little you believed in him. I stayed quiet when you tried to push Drew into the company. But I'm done staying quiet. This company will go to the person who reminds me most of the man I once wanted to be. You may not like it. That's your burden to carry now. Silence fell, like someone had shut off the sound in the room. Mom's mouth opened, then closed. Drew just stood there, hands shaking. Elise was shrinking beside him, her eyes flicking between everyone like she wanted to disappear. And then Drew snapped. "You manipulated him," he said, pointing at me. "This is some twisted game. You think you've won, huh? Because you married some rich woman and kissed up to Dad on his deathbed." I stood. "I didn't have to manipulate anyone," I said. "I just showed up." He moved toward me fast, too fast. But Sabrina stepped in between us without hesitation, calm but firm. "Don't," she said. Just that. But her voice could have stopped traffic. Drew glared at her, then at me. And then, for the first time in years, I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Fear. Not of me. Not of Sabrina. But of what he'd lost. Of what he never really had. He turned to Elise, expecting support. But she just stared at the floor. And that's when I knew. He had no one left to blame but himself. But the real fallout hadn't even begun yet. Because as the room emptied and the lawyer packed up, Sabrina leaned in and whispered something to me. And when I heard it, I almost dropped her hand. Sabrina didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her words were like a scalpel, precise, quiet, and instantly sharp. "He tried to contact me," she whispered, "before the funeral. A week ago, through a mutual client." I didn't react right away. I just kept my eyes on the now half-empty room, watching Drew storm off toward the garage like a man looking for something to break. My throat tightened. "When?" I asked. "Last Friday," she said softly. "He asked our client to pass along his number to me. Said it was about a business proposal. I didn't tell you because I wanted to see what kind of move he was making first. And now we knew. He hadn't just stolen the woman I loved years ago. He hadn't just paraded her in front of me at our father's funeral or mocked me with that smug little jab about finishing first. He was still trying to sink his claws into everything I had, even after everything that had just happened. And the worst part? It still hurt. I thought I was past it. I thought marrying Sabrina, rebuilding my life, and watching Drew's smug smile finally crumble would be enough. But it wasn't, because somewhere deep down, part of me still wanted a brother. Still wanted my mother to see me, just once, without measuring me against the shadow she'd shaped Drew into. Later that night, I stood in my old childhood bedroom, now empty, stripped down, the posters and trophies long gone. Just 4 beige walls and a small desk that still had a carved R+ in the corner. I must have done that when I was 13, when I still believed love was permanent and families were forever. Sabrina had gone to take a call outside. I told her I needed a moment alone. That's when I saw it. An old photo on the shelf above the desk. Faded, bent at the edges. It was me and Drew in high school. We were at some summer lake trip, shirtless, grinning, arms slung around each other's shoulders like we actually had each other's backs. He had that same cocky smile. And I looked like I hadn't learned how much it could all be ripped away yet. I sank into the creaky desk chair, elbows on my knees, hands rubbing at my face. All those years of trying to earn respect, trying to be the better man, trying not to let the bitterness fester. And now here I was, sitting in the wreckage of a family that had never really valued me. A father who came around too late. A mother who still thought I was the backup plan. A brother who saw me as little more than a stepping stone to his next win. I didn't cry. Not this time. But I felt hollow. And I hated that part of me still cared. When Sabrina came back in, she didn't say anything. She just placed a hand on my shoulder and stood beside me in silence. I reached up and took her hand, threading my fingers through hers. "I don't want to fight them," I murmured. "Not anymore." "You don't have to," she said. "But I also can't just keep letting them rewrite the narrative. I can't let Drew twist this into another story where I'm the villain who stole his life." "Then don't," she said simply. "Tell the truth. In your way. On your terms." Her words stuck with me. I stayed up that night, walking the halls of the estate. Every corner held some piece of a memory, some good, some sour. I found myself in Dad's study around 2 a.m., flipping through some of his old journals and notes. He wasn't much of a writer, but he'd kept records. Letters he never sent. Budget notes. Even printouts of old emails between him and our family lawyer. In one of them, I found a sentence that stopped me cold. "Ryan's not loud, but he's solid. I don't say it enough, but he's who I'd want in charge if it all came down." I didn't know whether to feel pride or anger. Why had he never said this to me? Why did he only find his voice through paperwork and lawyers after he was gone? But that sentence, it lit something in me. Not rage, not revenge, just resolve. I closed the folder, pulled out my phone, and began typing. The next morning, I asked Sabrina to help me get a few things moving. I made calls. I contacted the board of Whitmore Logistics. I started reviewing the bylaws. I didn't know exactly what I was building toward yet, but I knew I wasn't going to just sit back and watch Drew throw one last tantrum and try to burn everything down. Because he would. I knew that now. This wasn't over for him. Not by a long shot. But it was changing for me. I wasn't going to play defense anymore. And if Drew wanted to test how solid I really was, he'd get his answer soon enough. The shift didn't happen overnight. It never does. But over the next few weeks, something changed, not just around me, but in me. I returned home with Sabrina to our place in Seattle, a penthouse with wide windows and a quiet view of the Sound. The kind of home that felt calm, like it had nothing to prove. I remember standing on the balcony that first evening back, watching the sun dissolve into the ocean, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time, certainty. Not about what I'd do next, but about why I had to do it. Drew was silent for about 10 days after the will reading. No texts, no calls, not even one of his dramatic rants on social media. I knew what that meant. He was scrambling. Behind closed doors, he was surely contacting every connection, every lawyer, every family friend who might find a loophole or some shred of sympathy to rally behind him. He'd always believed that confidence could fill in the gaps where competence failed. But now, there were no shortcuts. No mom to whisper in Dad's ear. No Elise to run to when the lights dimmed. Meanwhile, I began the process of stepping into the role Dad had quietly built for me. At first, I wasn't sure I'd even keep the company. But Sabrina, ever the strategist, said something that stuck with me. You don't have to wear your father's shoes. Just walk the path he paved, with your own stride. So I did. I flew down to meet the Whitmore Logistics board 2 weeks after the funeral. I expected skepticism, doubt, maybe even resistance. Instead, I walked into a room of gray suits and expectant eyes, and the first thing the chairman said was, "You look just like your father when he was young." But I didn't feel like him, and I didn't want to be him. I told them as much. I'm not here to make promises I can't keep, I began. But I won't coast on my name either. I want to understand what this company needs to survive the next 10 years, not just the next quarter. They nodded, slowly at first, then with real interest. By the end of that 2-hour meeting, I had half of them shaking my hand and the other half pulling me aside to quietly say they were relieved Drew wouldn't be involved. Sabrina was right. Dad had left the infrastructure, but now it was mine to shape. That same week, a small business podcast interviewed Sabrina about her newest acquisition, and when the host asked about her husband, she didn't flinch. "He's the most disciplined person I've ever met," she said, smiling. "He doesn't talk much, but when he moves, things shift." It shouldn't have meant as much as it did, but hearing those words made something tighten in my chest. It felt like someone finally saw the version of me I'd always known was there, beneath the quiet, beneath the years of being second best. The next month was a blur of meetings, plans, and quiet victories. We hired a new CFO for Whitmore Logistics, a sharp woman named Natalie, with zero tolerance for fluff and a talent for spotting hidden inefficiencies. I let Sabrina consult on operations strategy, though she never overstepped. She was careful, respectful, she let me lead. And the numbers? They spoke for themselves. Revenues stabilized, employee morale improved, and within 6 weeks, we negotiated 2 contracts that Dad's team had been trying to land for years. My inbox went from ignored to overflowing. I found myself invited to dinners, conferences, private equity discussions, none of which had ever included me before. But through it all, I stayed focused and quiet. Let Drew make the noise. I was building the foundation. Then, on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, the phone rang. I was in the office, going over restructuring plans with Natalie. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. It was Elise. "Hey," she said softly. There was a long pause, like we were both trying to figure out if we were strangers or still something else. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up," she continued. "But I wanted to say congratulations." I waited. She sighed. "You know, Drew's been difficult. He's taking it hard. He keeps saying you manipulated Dad somehow, or that Sabrina made you do it." "Did she?" I asked, my voice calm. "No," she admitted. He can't accept that you actually came out ahead, that you built something without playing dirty. It doesn't fit his version of the story." That line stuck with me. It doesn't fit his version of the story. Because that's what it always was with Drew. A story where he was the hero, no matter how much wreckage he left behind. And now, he had no narrative that could explain this version of reality where I didn't just survive, I thrived. Elise hesitated. Then, in a quieter voice, "Can I ask you something?" I didn't answer, but she took that as a yes. "Are you happy?" I thought about that for a long moment. About Sabrina curled up with her tablet on the couch at night, humming softly while she worked. About the quiet mornings with fresh coffee and shared glances across the kitchen. About the growing respect I was earning, not demanded, not gifted, but earned, from people who once ignored me. "Yes," I said. "I am." Elise was silent on the other end. Then she whispered, "I'm sorry." "I know," I said gently. "But that chapter's closed." She didn't argue, just hung up quietly. And when I looked up, I saw Sabrina standing in the doorway, holding 2 coffees. She didn't ask about the call, just raised a brow and offered the extra cup. I took it. Life had shifted, subtly but completely. But I knew the calm wouldn't last, because I had just stepped fully into the life Drew believed belonged to him. And now, somewhere out there, he was rewriting his next move. And the only question left was, how far would he go this time? It began with a single envelope, hand-delivered. No return address, no note, just my name on the front, pinned in the kind of rushed handwriting you only see when someone is angry or desperate. I opened it at my desk the next morning, a light drizzle tapping against the office windows as Seattle yawned awake below. Inside was a folded set of documents, photocopies of emails, legal filings, and one printed text conversation. My heart rate slowed as I flipped through them. Then it started picking up again. Drew. He'd been trying to sell confidential Whitmore Logistics client data to one of our competitors. Small time so far, nothing that had moved past whispers. The emails showed him offering insight on contracts, vendor weaknesses, even private performance metrics. It hadn't gone through yet, but he'd tried. And the worst part? He wasn't even smart about it. He'd contacted an old acquaintance of his, someone he used to brag about beating in high school debates. Turns out that guy had climbed up the ladder at one of our rival firms. But apparently, he had a moral compass and a conscience. He sent everything anonymously, didn't want to be involved, but couldn't ignore what Drew was doing. I sat back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. So this was it. Drew hadn't just accepted the loss. He was trying to sabotage me, to poison the ground I was finally standing on. Not to build something for himself, no. That would take vision, patience. He just wanted me to fall. For days, I didn't tell anyone. Not Sabrina. Not Natalie. Not the board. Instead, I began gathering. I traced Drew's communication patterns, used my old skills in cybersecurity to check where else he might have sent things, what data might have been exposed. I discovered he had access credentials that should have been revoked when Dad passed, but someone in our outdated IT department had overlooked them. I quietly fixed the hole. No drama, no warnings, just preparation. Because if Drew was going to play dirty, then I needed to be several moves ahead. I flew out to New York for a conference the following week. Tech meets logistics, a strange combination, but one that mattered in our world. Sabrina spoke on a panel, but I had a different reason for being there. I met with another company, a startup I'd been tracking for over a year. Quietly, I'd been considering expanding Whitmore Logistics into something new, digital inventory automation. Something Dad never understood. But the world was shifting. Old models were rotting. And this startup? They were lean, smart, and hungry. All they needed was a strong partner to scale. I made them an offer. Not public, not loud, but enough to get their board's attention. If the deal went through, it would put Whitmore Logistics in a position of dominance. Not just survival, control, across multiple verticals. The deal came with a catch, though. We'd need to do a full internal audit for legal compliance before they signed off, standard practice. But for me, it was an opportunity. An audit meant every file, every communication, every ghost in the machine exposed. And Drew's fingerprints were all over things I now knew he'd hoped no one would ever see. I called Natalie into my office the next day. "I want to do a top-down systems audit," I said. She frowned. "You mean for the acquisition?" "That's part of it," I said. "But I also want to know who still has legacy access to confidential systems." Her eyes narrowed just slightly. "You think someone's poking around?" "Not yet," I said. "But I want to be ready if they do." She didn't press, because she trusted me now. And then, almost like fate aligning itself, I got another surprise. Sabrina walked into my office later that day with a smile I hadn't seen in weeks. A smile that meant something just clicked. "We found the missing link," she said, dropping a binder on my desk. Inside were scanned documents from a property we'd inherited, some old development land our father had bought years ago but never built on. He always said it was too risky. But what Sabrina had discovered through a quiet land survey was that the zoning laws had shifted. That land was now cleared for commercial construction. Downtown, a gold mine. And in the bottom of the folder was a contract, and signed, between Dad and a company Drew had once tried to start. A contract Dad never moved forward with. One he quietly buried. He never trusted Drew to develop it. But now it was mine. "It's shovel-ready," Sabrina said. "And if you back it through Whitmore, you could double your valuation inside a year." My head swam. Everything was aligning. Power, leverage, visibility. The very things Drew had always thought were his by birthright. He tried to break me 6 years ago. Tried to humiliate me at a funeral. Tried to claw at my foundation when I finally stood on my own. But he didn't know what was coming. Because now I had more than money. I had proof. I had power. I had a company behind me. A wife beside me. And a name Drew couldn't erase anymore, not even with lies. I didn't want revenge. But I was about to show him something far worse than anger. Indifference. And when I executed the next move, publicly, he would finally understand what it meant to lose something he never truly owned. But first, I had one last thing to do. Because Drew wasn't going to stop. Not until I made sure he couldn't. It was all in the timing. That was something Drew never understood. He rushed everything. Relationships, business deals, even his own downfall. But I'd spent the last 6 years learning how to wait. How to sharpen the blade quietly while everyone else was still swinging wildly. And now, the blade was ready. The internal audit finished ahead of schedule. Natalie and her team turned over their findings on a Thursday morning, and I read them 3 times just to be sure. Drew's unauthorized access had left a trail, clear as day. Data pulls from internal reports, suspicious logins from a private IP, and worst of all, a download of confidential bid information just days before one of our largest contracts was lost to a competitor. That loss had cost us nearly $4 million. The board didn't know it yet, but they would. I called a special executive meeting for Monday morning. Sabrina would be present. So would the compliance officer, the company attorney, and the entire board of directors. And because it was protocol to invite all shareholders with a past managerial history and stake over 5%, Drew would be there too. I made sure of it. He showed up 5 minutes late, of course, wearing a too-tight suit and an overconfident smirk, like he thought he was stepping into some casual sit-down where he'd get to play the role of misunderstood genius. Elise wasn't with him. I had a feeling she was finally starting to see through the cracks. "Didn't think you'd miss the chance to look important," Drew said as he dropped into a leather chair near the end of the table. I didn't respond, just nodded to the lead attorney to begin. The attorney cleared his throat and pulled up the screen behind him, where a slide titled Security Breach Findings. Summary report glowed in large, clean letters. The room fell quiet. As the findings were laid out, time-stamped access logs, flagged IP addresses, and correlations with lost contracts. I watched the reactions around the table. Confusion, shock, then anger. And Drew? He didn't blink. Not at first. But the moment the lawyer showed the screenshots of his emails, offering Whitmore's internal bid numbers to a rival firm, his jaw clenched. "This is absurd," he finally said. "You really think I'd risk everything over that?" The attorney responded calmly. "You didn't just risk it. You executed it. We have digital verification. Timestamps. Traces of the downloads made using your legacy credentials. Mr. Whitmore," he glanced at me, "has already filed for a retroactive internal injunction, and given the evidence, we're preparing to notify the state authorities." Drew laughed, but it was thin, brittle. "This is a setup." Natalie spoke then. "You're the only person who still had access through a blind credential link your father left. We caught it. You exploited it." Sabrina leaned forward. "And you thought you were going to sell off his company piece by piece while smiling at his funeral. You really don't know how to build anything, do you?" Drew turned red. "This is insane. You're just trying to wipe me out of the family completely." I finally spoke. Calm. Steady. "No, Drew. You did that to yourself. I'm just making it official." I slid a document across the table. It was a formal cease and desist order, drafted by our legal team, barring Drew from all Whitmore-owned properties, communications, and internal systems. He was also being referred to state business regulators for corporate espionage and data theft, charges that, while they might not land him in prison, would destroy any chance of starting a business again. His name would be flagged in every due diligence process for the rest of his life. He stared at the paper, then at me. "You think you're the better man now?" he spat. "No," I said simply. "I'm just not the fool anymore." He stood, shoulders heaving. "This isn't over. You think this is the end? You're still the same silent little ghost living in my shadow. No matter what you do." "Then maybe," I said, cutting in gently, "it's time you stop walking in front of the sun." He blinked, taken aback. That was the last thing I said to him. The board voted, unanimously, to sever all future association with Drew. His remaining shares, thanks to a clause Dad added in his final update, were forfeitable upon proven misconduct, which, given the report, was as proven as it could get. By noon, his access was revoked. By nightfall, the press got wind of the internal security breach and the swift action taken by new leadership. I gave no comment. Sabrina issued a one-line statement. "We protect what we build." Drew, I later heard, tried to get a meeting with one of our former competitors, only to be politely turned away. He'd burned too many bridges. And the ones he thought he could buy? They were owned by someone else now. Me. In the days that followed, I didn't celebrate. I just worked. Contracts were signed with the startup. Our market value rose. Sabrina negotiated an investment partnership with a European firm that gave us presence in 3 new countries. I spent my days building, not gloating, not chasing ghosts. But there was one final moment that made the revenge truly settle. A letter arrived. Handwritten. No envelope this time. Just a short message on lined paper. "You got what you wanted. I hope it was worth it. D." I folded it once and tucked it into the back of my desk drawer without a word. Because I had no interest in responding. He wanted me to come down to his level. But I was already building something he couldn't reach anymore. And he finally knew it. The fallout came quickly. A week after the board meeting, Drew's name hit the industry blacklist. The startup circles he used to lurk in closed their doors. I didn't have to say a word. The documents we'd uncovered spoke louder than I ever could. His LinkedIn went dark. Elise moved out, quietly, without drama. I knew because Sabrina received an automated change of address alert linked to one of the old shared properties Drew had tried to funnel through their joint accounts. She moved back in with her sister across town. I wasn't surprised. A month later, Mom called. I stared at the screen for a long time. It blinked once, twice. Then I let it go to voicemail. She tried again the next day. This time, she left a message. "Ryan, I don't even know what to say. He's devastated. You didn't have to destroy him like that. He's your brother." No apology. Not even a hint of accountability. Just more excuses. More of the same. I deleted the message without replying. 3 months passed. Whitmore Logistics was thriving. The acquisition was finalized, and with Sabrina's guidance, we rolled out a new digital logistics platform that reduced processing time by 37%. Our valuation doubled. Forbes ran a profile titled "The Silent Son Who Rebuilt an Empire." I didn't care much for the headline, but the truth underneath it mattered. I was finally seen. Not because I screamed, but because I stood firm. Drew? He tried to start over. Moved to a smaller city 2 states over and launched a consulting firm under a different name. But it didn't last. Word spread. No one trusted a man with a record of corporate theft and a reputation for burning bridges. One of our clients sent me a photo a few months later. Drew, working at a co-working space, hunched over a laptop, wearing the same jacket he wore at Dad's funeral. Same scowl, too. He wasn't building anything. He was just trying to stay afloat. Mom stopped calling after that. I think she understood I wasn't coming back. Not to Sunday dinners, not to birthdays, not to the fantasies she tried to preserve. The version of me who accepted scraps was gone. And Elise? I saw her once, by accident, at a conference, standing near the coffee booth with a quiet, distant look in her eyes. She didn't speak. Neither did I. But the sadness in her eyes said everything. She hadn't just lost me. She'd traded me. And now, the cost had caught up. That night, back at home, I stood on the balcony with Sabrina, watching the city lights flicker beneath us. "You know," she said, "you never once raised your voice through all of this." "Didn't need to," I said. She smiled and leaned her head on my shoulder. "You didn't just win. You outgrew them." And she was right. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was standing in anyone's shadow. I was standing on solid ground. My own. And I'd built it from the ashes they left behind. Final line. Some men fight for power. Others build it, brick by silent brick, until the ones who tried to bury them are left choking on the dust.